Police Department.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to present this proposed budget. I would like to start off by acknowledging and thanking Finance. They're always a significant help to department directors, and in particular Karen, so thank you. Significant accomplishments, of course, we continue to enjoy a relatively low crime rate. We did have an uptick in violent crime, but our property crime continues to fall. Safety Town held its third consecutive year. We're already over 80 applications for this current year, which is a good number. Probably most significantly in terms of our resources during 17 going towards accreditation, which we were awarded, as you know, in March. And our detective section sustained an outstanding clearance rate of 91% of assigned cases. Some budget highlights, basically our budget is designed to continue to enhance quality of life here in Los Alamos through public safety. Again, that's not just enforcement based. We try and maximize our effectiveness through multiple collaborations and partnerships throughout the community. And so in terms of budget, if you could go to I believe that's the next slide, I was able to come 45,000 under, and I want to explain that because one of the add-ons is exactly 45,000. So last year, if you'll recall, I had requested to update our mobile computing systems, which are end of life. And what you did was approve 45,000 with that year, this current budget cycle, with the potential to include 45,000 for this upcoming and the year after. I had that in there, not thinking that needed to come back to you, and Karen took that out. So actually, can I take back what I said about Karen? No, I'm just kidding. So that's why you see a 45,000 reduction. I did come exactly flat, but we had to take that back out, and then you'll see it as an add-on. But essentially, I'm under. Things are going well in the department, and I feel comfortable that if you approve this budget, we'll be able to maintain our level of service. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Councilor O'Leary.
No questions.
Councilor Chandler, you had a question.
Chief, can you help me understand how it is we're dropping our animal control budget by 3%?
Other than salary and benefits, the predominant feature of that budget is related to medical expense, and that is driven predominantly by our average daily population, much the same type of analysis I would do for detention. That is an unknown, and every year I use historical figures and other factors, and it's not any reductions you see across the board aren't necessarily specific to any current operation. It's more in line with just meeting guidance to remain flat. I had to take reductions really across the board. So I'm comfortable in where we're at in that budget right now. Yeah, if could things make it tighter next year? Absolutely, but some of that's an unknown, and you give it your best guess based on historical expenditures.
Are you we know that you were getting money from the Friends of the Shelter last year. in the sum of excess of $20,000 a year to help pay for food and medical expenses. And so I'm perplexed as to how you're going to be making that money up when you're dropping the budget by 3%. So I still don't understand your answer.
Well, we haven't had the benefit of any additional funding from Friends of the Shelter this current budget year.
That's right.
And we're still, I have $26,000 encumbered in medical expenses that I haven't even spent yet. So some of that has to do with the fact that we've limited population, although that's more operational than budgetary at this point. And again, if that average daily population goes up, sure, that's going to impact overall expenses. So we'll just have to monitor that as we move through the year.
What do you mean you're limiting the population?
Due to some operational concerns that I have, we're focusing more on getting some operational things in line before we start taking in 40, 50 animals, which takes up all the time in their care. We've limited that. We've limited transfers. We don't limit if somebody drops off an animal. We don't limit when an animal is found roaming. We're not taking transfers from other agencies at this time to devote those resources to some operational issues.
So when did you stop taking animals transfers?
Off the top of my head, I don't know, but I would say 3 months ago.
3 months ago. And I've noticed on Facebook there are pleas for money for food and medical care. So help me understand how it is that there are requests for funds to help support food and medical care, and we're dropping the budget in the animal shelter.
When I found out that occurred, which was several months ago, I've addressed that internally. You shouldn't see any such postings. And I don't know why that was put out, because as I said, I'm comfortable with where my budget is at this present time.
And are you, is the shelter paying for medical treatment for all animals that need it?
Yes, I mean, excuse me, there's a decision to be made when you have an animal that has a costly surgery that's required. You look at the age of the animal, you look at the behavior of the animal, you look at a number of factors. I personally have to approve any euthanasia, and so our euthanasia number last year was 12, and by far most of those were behavioral related, or actually by far most of those were medical in terms of the animal had cancer or something, and then some of those are behavioral related. But we're not euthanizing animals as a practice rather than pay for medical expenses. We've spent approximately $34,000 in medical expenses to date.
And what procedures and policies do you have to evaluate when an animal is going to be euthanized?
Again, they call me or otherwise communicate to me what the situation is, unless it's an emergency, meaning the animal's in such pain that something immediate is required. I evaluate what is the condition, what's the vet saying, what is the prognosis, what is the quality of life, how old is the animal, does it have other medical issues, is there a behavior risk. Those are the types of things that I evaluate.
What happened to having a citizens committee that participated in decisions about euthanasia? What happened with that?
I've never known of such a committee to exist since I've been.
Oh, really? What about when the Friends were working with the department?
Well, the Friends could always offer an opinion, but they were never decision makers in anything.
So we have the chief of police making decisions on euthanizing dogs and cats?
Yes.
And have you been trained or gone to trainings as to what factors should be considered when euthanizing an animal?
No.
So it's just a kind of a personal approach?
No, as I said, it's a collaborative effort between internal staff and also the veterinarian who is trained, obviously. And it's a combination of all those factors.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Sheehy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In my work with the New Mexico Association of Counties, I hear complaints from other county jails that they're stuck with holding state prisoners and not getting full reimbursement, sometimes any reimbursement from the state. Do we have state prisoners, and are we getting reimbursement for holding them?
We do, and we do. And we do an analysis of estimated cost, and we have that number, and it's fairly high. And the amount of reimbursement that we get is minimal compared to the estimated cost.
So some relatively small percentage of what it actually costs us. So there may be some legislation that needs to be done to correct this, because it's not just our problem. Have release programs with ankle bracelets and other programs allowed us to reduce the number of county prisoners we have?
Yes. However, the majority of your detention facility costs are fixed costs. So
Right.
Reducing the average daily population certainly helps in many areas, food, medical, potential liability, all those things. But you're not going to see huge reductions in overall detention budget, whether we have 20, average daily population of 20 versus 16.
And if we wanted to fill the jail, with these state prisoners, it's not voluntary. They generally just give them to us, and it's our responsibility.
Correct.
So if we wanted to volunteer to take prisoners, we would certainly need to get a better arrangement about reimbursement for the cost of keeping those prisoners, correct?
Yes, and that's a separate issue. I mean, if there are jails or detention facilities that take in detainees as a matter of earning revenue for their area, that's different than what you're, what's happening is in a state court, individuals are being sentenced to less than 365. So then they come to us if it happened here. It's not that the state saying, "Hey, pick up this guy from Las Cruces and put him in your jail." It's offenses that are happening here that are convicted out of state court that aren't sent to the state facility because of the sentence.
Yeah, coordination needed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Majori.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, thanks for coming and presenting. The 52% increase in contractual services, what's that down to?
Could you scroll through so I can see where that's at? Karen's looking, but I know off the top of my head, a lot of the larger shifts are actual just shifts from one to the other, taking it out of one and putting into the other versus an actual increase. That's part of it. There's got to be more to it than that. 45,000 for the
I mean,
didn't we move the 20,000 from the courts into contractual, and then Safety Town. Two new ones are not necessarily new, but that we moved specifically there were net transcripts, which is a function of our investigative section to transcribe interviews for the court. Say that again. Juvenile housing was a big one, I remember now. We underfunded that last year. That's also an unknown, but it's also very expensive. So if we have more juveniles that require
so juvenile
detention services, then it's going to cost us more. And so we underfunded it last year. We put more in it this year.
So is, if I can interrupt for a sec, the juvenile housing, is that done in our detention center?
Santa Fe.
Ah, okay, hence the contractual nature.
17,500 for a full-scale active shooter training.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, Councilor Korsinski.
So if I understand correctly, you had originally had this as a flat budget, but you had to take out that 45,000, so now we've come in 45,000 under flat. Is your preference, your intention to have had that 45,000 in this budget and actually had a flat budget, or?
There's three add-ons. One is the 45,000, which is the second part of three parts of that mobile computing project. The third is a camera system upgrade, and the first is operational costs. So when that 45 was in there, I dropped 51.9 to get to flat, and that came from, again, across the board. A lot of it was overtime, training. Those are predominantly the areas that I drew from with across different sections within the department. So, but now that it's out,
you'd rather see it in the operations?
Well, I have to sustain that. Really, I mean, that would be my.
So, this is me personally. You know, I asked for a flat budget. This came in under. I would personally be fine with increasing it 45,000, wherever works best for you to run an effective police department. You know, obviously, this is a very safe town, and we want to keep it that way. And we didn't ask you to come under budget, so I would be okay with adding 45,000 back in. If we did that, Steve, would we have to add to a specific line, or could we just say 45,000 back into operations?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Krobosinski, I think you could go either way. You could specify if you wanted to, or you could just say in total to operations.
I'd rather have the police chief personally choose where that's best fit, but okay. Thank you, that answers my question. I'll try to make that motion when the time's right.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, may I make a question?
Go ahead.
So, Chief, I wanted to congratulate you and your department again on achieving your certification. You have come to the budget hearing for the last, I think you first started telling us about it in 2015, and it's been a huge amount of work for you all to earn this accreditation, and it's a real testament to the professionalism of your department and your leadership. And could you talk a little bit about it and about, tell us if there are other police departments in New Mexico that have earned this kind of accreditation?
Chair Israelovich, Councilor O'Leary, thank you for that. It was a daunting task, and I'm very proud of the men and women that serve this community in the department. And it was a collective achievement. And from here on out, we will need to sustain that, and that comes in the form of annual partial reassessments, which is not an on-site assessment. It's all digitized now. And then every 4 years, an actual going through what we just went through. We're in a great position moving forward to be able to sustain those standards. Our policies where it needs to be, and our people are committed to the process. We are the third agency here in New Mexico, that being State Police in Farmington, and we are the first community to have both police and fire nationally accredited. So, great place to live, safe place to live.
Well, thank you, Chief. It's great to hear that and to know, you do have a big budget and you guys are spending it in good ways, and this kind of recognition is a reinforcement to our confidence in you and in improving this budget. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So, Chief, which certification do you believe is more prestigious, the police departments or the fire departments?
Without a doubt, it's the police department.
Thank you for your presentation. If there are no other comments, then I'll invite a motion.
Make a motion.
Councilor Gorbaczynski.
So I'd like to move that we tentatively approve the budget for the police department in the amount of $8,685,247. That is adding in the other $45,000, and with that $45,000 to be able to go towards operations as the police chief sees fit.
Second.
Okay, so I just have a procedural question about what we approve the budget is. Typically, we approve a budget. The total amount's not what those, except for the, well, I'm trying to understand whether your motion is in. According to the charter, so I guess, Mr. Liphart, how specific can, I guess it's an add-on of $45,000 for that. Okay, so I apologize. I see the, I see that it's all kosher. Okay. Anyway, I'm trying to do things according to Doyle or Boyle or whatever the. Okay, it's so we have a motion by Councilor Gorbaczynski. It's been seconded by Councilor O'Leary. I apologize. If there's no discussion, then by show of hands, Councilor O'Leary.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes 7-0. Given the lateness of the hour, we're about 10 minutes to 10 o'clock. I think this would be an appropriate time to recess for the evening, and then we'll reconvene tomorrow at 6 o'clock, and we will start with